Hello, everybody, and welcome to Out and Equal's first webinar of the year in Q1. My name is Akriti Rana, and my pronouns are she and her. I am the APAC manager at the Global Impact Programs at Out and Equal. Today's topic is navigating the impact of public policy on LGBTQI plus diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in Asia Pacific. In 2024, we at Out and Equal are working to curate 4 webinars, one every quarter. Each quarterly webinar will delve into various aspects of LGBTQI plus inclusion, examining both challenges and opportunities unique to the APAC context. Through engaging presentations, panel discussions, and interactive Q&A sessions, attendees will gain valuable insights into strategies for fostering a more inclusive workplace environment for LGBTQI plus individuals. Topics covered will include legal frameworks, cultural sensitivities, organizational policies, and practical initiatives aimed at promoting DEIB in the workplace. By bringing together thought leaders, practitioners, and advocates from across the APAC region, these webinars will aim to drive meaningful progress towards greater LGBTQI plus workplace inclusion and diversity. Before I welcome our moderator and panelist, I would like to go over some housekeeping. All participants are automatically muted by our webinar administrators. Please type any questions you may have using the Q&A feature on Zoom today. And this is a closed door conversation that we are having today. This webinar will be recorded and posted on Out and Equals Hub. We encourage you all to share this video with your colleagues at work. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome the moderator of our program today, Curtis Baker. Curtis is the Asia Pacific Regional Inclusion, Diversity and Equity and Employee Experience Lead at Dow. In this combined role, Curtis is responsible for driving and implementing the inclusion and diversity and employee experience strategy and providing expertise, consultation, and support to businesses, functional and ERG leaders, and employee experience change champions in the region. He drives the social component of Dow's ESG strategy and growth into the region and amplifies globally the voice from Asia Pacific. Curtis is joining us from Shanghai today. Curtis, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much, my friend. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon for everyone online today. And really excited to get us started here. And I hope this conversation today is just that it's a conversation. It's not just one-sided. So as Akriti was mentioning, please feel free to utilize the question in the Q&A part so that we can have that discussion. And if something pops up, please do feel free to have that in there as well. But I'm excited to share this morning with 2 amazing folks who I personally absolutely adore and admire, and professionally just look to and with highest esteem. So Sasha and Jace, come on. Really excited to bring both to, again, friends, but also pioneers and leads. And a really good morning to both of you. Hope you've had some coffee and tea to get us started. I know I still have my coffee here on round 2, so I'm ready. As a jet lag is still from last week being in the States. But hey, good morning to both of you. And thanks for taking the time to share this morning. What better way to get started on a Wednesday than with the 3 of us here?
Completely agree with you, Curtis. And you don't look jet lagged. You don't sound it either. So I think you're just trying to make us feel better because you look better.
It's
Good
amazing how that
morning, good
moisturizer
morning.
does. Well, hey, before we jump into the meat of today, let's just take a moment and introduce yourselves and just say, who you are, what your role is, and we'll just start with that way. And so, since it's early, Sasha or Natasha, her friends call you Sasha.
Yes,
So
friends
Natasha,
call
we'll
me
just start
Sasha.
with you. We'll just start with you there, my
Thanks,
friend.
Curtis. Thanks. I completely agree with you. I think, I know that it's the company that makes life so much more pleasant. So I'm thrilled to share the stage with you and with Jez. I mean, I feel privileged, I feel humbled, I feel uplifted. So thank you very much for that. So I'm Natasha Shirazi. I'm based in Bangalore. My pronouns are she, her. I lead culture, diversity, and inclusion for the region for Dell. My journey actually has been a long, strenuous one from the point of view is that when I started working to how I work right now is like done a 365-degree change. But my journey with inclusion and diversity actually started really young. And I'm hoping that today's conversation will make it easier for everyone to understand that we're all on the same journey. And some of us, like you, Curtis and Jez, are slightly ahead, and that's all right. It's always good to have people you can lean on and learn from. So I'm hoping today's conversation, I actually learn a lot, and we kind of navigate why it's so important and how each part to play. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'm looking forward to today.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Dave, over to you.
All right. For myself, I'm happy to say that my journey to DNI actually started with Out and Equal. Back in 2016 as a business research group leader for our business DRG in the Philippines and IBM. I came with the purpose of really deploying equal benefits in IBM and beyond in the country. And I had the opportunity to actually join Out and Equal in 2016. From then on, I've made connections, friendship, and learnings. I've had learnings that I bring myself with me today, as eventually, I suppose my company saw me as volunteering a lot, and they made me a leader for diversity and inclusion. Previously for APAC Marketplace, where I work on external partnerships, and most recently transitioned to internal programming in ASEAN and Korea. So at this point, I lead diversity and inclusion for the region for IBM. And I'm happy to be friends and good have professional relationship with Curtis and Sasha here.
Fantastic. For me, I think it was the year of 2017. It was Out and Equal that got me started because I simply asked this question, what are we doing around Pride? And at that time, I was with another company, and they were like, "We don't know what to do with your questions. Here, go to Out and Equal." And I was like, "Okay." And I think the intersectionality, though, as well as Out and Equal, is not just around LGBTQ, but there is a lot of intersectionality. And I think today, we want to have this conversation to talk about something very specific. I think that sometimes we're afraid to talk to, or it's some of that part that sometimes it's just, this again. But I think we look for around more proactive and looking at the rails that we operate in and around those. I wouldn't say boundaries, but there are sometimes some guide rails that we have to. And I think if any one of this group right here, we'd like to push those boundaries a little bit as far as we can. But that's not always legal boundaries, but sometimes it's also cultural boundaries. And so I love the diversity of the group here, where we're coming from all throughout Asia Pacific region, where we're sitting. We have Philippines represented. We also based in Thailand at the moment. India. I'm based in Shanghai, and I know that originally, obviously, not from this region, from the U.S. So we all have this specific, or these different diversity of elements bringing into that. So our goal today is really just to help, I think, have a conversation, but help to open some eyes, but also use some of our own personal experiences to say, we tried this, whether it was success or a failure or a tweak, that we've tried this. And so you can help to take that, and hopefully by the end of the day, you can be able to take at least one or two nuggets back to your place and say, hey, but they've done this, or hey, have we thought about doing it this way? And creating a more inclusive, equitable, and a sense of belonging wherever we work, especially within the whole Asia Pacific region. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and get started. So, Natasha, I'm going to start with you this morning and just kind of look at, I think as we talked about, it's not only with public policy, it's not just the legal framework, but sometimes also the cultural framework as well that can sometimes, both positively and negatively can impact. So how does cultural and legal, say those frameworks or those guide rails impact or contribute, those frameworks, the implementation of DEI initiatives within your organization?
And I know we kind of, went through this when we've had conversations, I think, amongst ourselves. It's like, which one comes first and which one comes second, and, which one is more important and which one is, impacts either the internal policies or the external policies. And so again, I can give you examples. There are certain rules and laws in the lands that govern Asia, which are very distinct. And those rules make it mandated for people to at least not discriminate. It might not change your point of view. It might not really change your mind, but at least it tells you, listen, according to the laws of the land, what you're doing is wrong behavior. And I think that's very, very important as a starting point, as a midpoint, and sometimes even it kind of re-energizes the conversation. So I think from a regional perspective, there have been a lot of laws that have changed. Some of them have been kind of at least been made aware of. People at least are made aware of. And I think that's important. For India, the latest one that we had was the Marriage Equality Act. It brought up a whole lot of conversations on, first of all, did I understand as a heterosexual person what was marriage equality? Did I even realize what was the kind of powers I had? I didn't. And I think that was something that was good because it then instigated saying things that I wasn't aware of and I take for granted. What about people who somehow don't have those basic rules of engagement and protections? And I think what I loved about the whole discussion was the protection part of it. Being in a legalized relationship gave you a lot of protection. It gave you a lot of identity. It gave you a lot of, financial protection, right? So that was great. Now, that being said, in all organizations, and I'll talk specifically for mine, yes, we've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a long time. And then we brought in the aspect of culture because as the world kind of opened up and people got together, you suddenly realized it wasn't just what you read in your books, it wasn't just what you watched on movies, but it was actually living people that you're engaging with. So if I was sitting in my country and thinking that, things are really bad, I'll go to another country and realize, no, they're not bad, they're actually great, or they're really worse. So I think that kind of brought up a lot of, again, perspectives in people, conversations in people. So it's very, very important. Now, again, that being said, laws are there. It can be kind of created, and 9 times out of 10 laws come because people are changing. And I'd like to think the world is becoming a better place. We are becoming a lot more aware of what everyone should get as basic needs and rights. But I always give this example in Dell when I talk to my team members is that, it's like, you come to my organization and you wear a really lovely Dell coat, and that Dell coat fits you, or it doesn't fit you. It has a pocket, it has a particular color, it has a particular style. Now that style and suits you or doesn't suit you, but we still expect you to wear that coat because that's the culture of Dell. We are inclusive. We believe in diversity. We believe in a person's right to be who and what they are. We want you to represent who you are. But that process of me changing my mind and my team's mind is over a period of time. And we keep on saying, but remember, you're still wearing my coat. And my coat still has these particular designs, but guess what? If you want to change the color a little bit, you can. But you can't change a color which impacts somebody else, or you can't change a design that impacts somebody else because you want it to fit you only. So I think it's very, very important, Curtis, for culture to kind of start from within the organization, and that absolutely starts with our leader, then starts within individuals. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but how employee resource groups help with this cultural awareness, and it brings you a really great platform to at least have the conversations. So again, which is more important? I think that's where the continuous discussion happens. But at our heart, people have to start realizing the world we are living in is the only world that I can change for the future. The past, I can't really change. I can learn from it. And there are a lot of learnings from it. But the commitment we make is as individuals in Dell, how are we changing the world? How are we looking to impact people positively? And how are we really looking even to start having conversations? Because it's extremely important. Yeah.
Natasha, you hit on a couple of really great points there, talking about, I think what we see in Asia is so diverse in every country that we have, and the rules and laws are so, some are really moving forward.
Yes.
We're talking about trying to come together for pride, and then yet we have some parts where it's like, we would dare not fly a rainbow flag because of protection or even legal
Yes.
license to operate being pulled, and that mindset change is so huge,
Yes.
Our CEO continuously uses this quote when he talks about IDing, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that can be both positive, but also negative. If it's a
Yeah.
bad culture, it can also, you have all this strategy put into there, an
Yes.
ID strategy, and the culture is just not there, that it can just totally tear that away. So, Jason, I want to ask you the same question. And, and I think too, for you, I mean, not only within IBM, but also, you're very active outside of the space of IBM, in the entire region. So if you have maybe your perspective on that from both perspectives, I'd love for you to share a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So for context for our audience, my role used to heavily be external in nature. So it meant not only partnerships with civil society organizations, but also our clients, because we believe that if we have the practices and thought leadership to advance inclusion in the workplace, we should use the same to help our clients and our potential clients in doing so. So in the context of cultural or legal frameworks, and how it affects our clients' approaches and our partners' approaches with DEI, I can say that number one, the legal concept is a double-edged sword, because in Asia in particular, it can either elevate what one company does for the communities or saturate it, because how I say that because I've heard companies say that these are the only things that the government requires at the moment. And if we were to actually go beyond that, we're encouraging their behavior to not provide equal opportunities or equal benefits to LGBT plus people, which is, it's kind of off to hear, because it's just an excuse, but it is happening in this side of the world. So it either empowers the initiatives, or companies bank on progressing so that they will do more, which is really definitely wrong. Because if we were to look at the LGBT plus movement, not to mention all the other minorities in the lens of the government, then no company will do anything at all anymore. We already know that in Out and Equal. So so that's how it is legal wise, but in the context of culture, I think that's the much bigger picture, because the legal framework is just policies and government mandates, but culture is how people actually behave. So when we look at that, it actually creates conversations about one topic vary vastly. For example, when we talk about race or generation, if we talk about it in the Japan context versus the Thailand context, the country where I'm in right now, it can be very different, because the generational issue in the workplace, for example, in Japan, is very different in Thailand right now, where it's the other way around. So when we talk about the frameworks of countries, I think it's really important that we're talking about both culture and legal aspects.
Is you tapped on something that we always say endow, double click on, because it's part of our strategy. And I think it's definitely part of the IBM strategy. I see that, and it's really cool. It's how you're engaging with clients or customers, that it's along the way, and that impact, and like this kind of going off of our script here. But how do you, just quickly, how do you see that benefiting you as a company? And Natasha, if you have anything to add on to that as well, how do you see that engaging your customer and your clients in the IND journey? And so let's say specifically with LGBT inclusion, how do you see that benefiting your organization?
It's definitely been benefit in so many ways. So you can think about the most straightforward way, the business development aspect, right? It's when you, number one, build relationships with your customers and potential customers in the lens of culture or DNI strategy. But more than that, because right now we're empowering all our employees to be that for IBM, to be ambassadors of DNI, it also enhances their employee experience, because they get to learn outside too, but they also grow and create a network of their mentors or their friends that they professionally learn from. So it is aligned to the talent strategy, but also the both business development, sales, and DNI advocacy. if I may say so.
How about for you, Natasha? Think about the customer part of, because we want to tie, it's always, how do you tie it back to the business? How do you measure it?
Yeah.
Where's the bottom line? Where's the money?
Yeah, no, it's extremely important, and I can't reiterate what Ajay said, right? It's the point is, what are we trying to change? We are trying to change a standard that we were not part of creating, right? I mean, you look at standard of leadership, you look at our processes, you look at our product, right? We were trying to change all those standards. So I know for a fact that when you bring in differences, and even if I take 10 steps back and say, as a heterosexual woman, I am not still comfortable in my ecosystem because I represent myself differently. But the whole point is when you start going to customers who turn around, look at you and say, listen, I don't see myself sitting at the table. I don't look at my product that suits me. Then businesses suddenly realize, which is normal, because that's you do need an action for a reaction to happen. And the action is usually the customer or the consumer. Somebody is triggering you and somebody is saying, listen, this doesn't suit me because it doesn't work for me. It doesn't, the product doesn't look as nice as I want it to look. It's not as convenient. It's not as functional, right? So those are all aspects that come in. For us, where the journey has started, and it started, of course, very, very prominently and obviously in the US. We have Eric Day, who's our very senior leader in Dell, who actually tells you very clearly, listen, there's no distinction. And the conversations I've had with him have been so different, because sometimes I'm having a conversation and thinking, I've not even thought of this answer. I've not even thought of this question. I've not even thought of something like this, because naturally I don't have that experience. And that's where it becomes important for us as individuals and as an organization to say, listen, what are we trying to do? We are trying to leave an impression in the world through our products, absolutely, because let's be very real, but we're also trying to leave an impression through our people and through our company. We're all vying to get the best talent. We're all vying to make the best processes. And that happens by people getting together and saying, listen, what's the distinctions that I have? And why do I look at this particular way or this particular process in a way that suits me? And then you realize there are 10 people like me. So we've been looking at culture, we've been looking at diversity. Supplier diversity is a really, really new concept, at least in this part of the world. Some companies are really better at it than the others. But what I like is that everyone's talking about it. And representation becomes very, very important, both internally and externally. Internally, I want to see people who look just like me, to be very honest, and who sound as maybe quirky as I am. Like you said, I have two names. My friends call me something else. My office calls me something else. Now, I want that to happen. It should be very organic. So how are we doing this? And it will all be an intersectional of conversations, Curtis, that, as an organization, where are people leading by example? How are they leading? Why are they leading? And of course, everything starts with people. So the more people we get into the organization who have a point of view and they talk to it, that's another thing. Having a point of view and staying silent is very different. It's more of us have to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about advocacy and outside of the walls of our companies in just a moment. But I think, for us, it's, we have in our DAO strategy, we have 7 pillars, and customers is one of those. And we've kind of looked at it differently, or I've looked at it differently in the region. Just recently in January this year, DAO hosted an Out Before roundtable in Japan, in Tokyo, exactly. And part of it was also bringing not only our customers as well, but then also potential customers to say that, we're on the journey together. But if your companies are anything like my companies, data, benchmark. And so we can say, this company is doing it, so we can too. And so, it's always the hardest being the first. But when we bring our customers along with us, we empower each other and we make the workplaces a little bit better. So, and this kind of ties us into our next question here, talking about, I think what's important is for us to use specific examples. I know both of you have amazing tons of examples, but let's talk about specific examples around the challenges related to LGBTQIA plus rights in the workforce. And we kind of topped on it just a little bit here, but kind of digging a little deeper, as the Disney song used to go. In the workplace, could you share with us, we'll start with you with this one. Can you share maybe specific policy challenges or opportunities, maybe we'll say, related to LGBTQI rights and workplace inclusion that you have impacted, both maybe in the country, but also within the region? And then also, how did you address them? And then more importantly, also, how did it impact? So we'll start with you.
I'll start with a particular example. So for countries where being LGBT is a crime, like Indonesia, Malaysia, and all those other countries, it's definitely hard to scale the initiatives that we're doing for the LGBT community. Um, so we have to find creative ways on how we can do so, because at the end of the day, LGBT employees in those countries still need the support. So what we tried to do is, because we've had a very powerful BRG in the Philippines years ago, during the pandemic, we started to scale it and make it a regional BRG. So while we started with employees who are based in the Philippines leading a regional network, we started reaching those who are also in those countries through company-wide Slack channels, for example, or distribution lists, but being more, like I said, creative in the way that we do it. So our approach has always been inclusive leadership and allyship, in these countries, and we talk about talent and cultural, talent development and professional development in the sense of diversity and inclusion. But there are ways. So right now there are members who are, of course, maintaining anonymity in terms of these countries, but at least we get to reach them. And because our initiatives are regional anyway, it doesn't harm for them to join them, or for people to know that they are joining it. Um, it becomes more tricky if it becomes country specific. So that's for a particular example. But I'd like to talk a little bit also about how these laws, I've seen really hinder progress in other companies. I'm grateful because I'm in a company that's very progressive. But in certain countries, like, there are it's not a crime to be LGBT plus, but there are no law supporting. For example, Philippines and Thailand. So these are the countries where, some companies tend to be more lax in terms of what they do. And they would go even further to say that, for example, Thailand is one of the most progressive countries when it comes to LGBT plus inclusion. But the reality is not in the workplace. It's 100% the opposite. Because what's happening is, because supposedly Thailand is already progressive, we don't have to do anything in the workplace anymore, which we know is not right. So it actually works against the community, for countries like these. And sometimes it even empowers companies in those countries that are difficult, or where being LGBT is a crime, because they find creative solutions. Whereas in countries where it's neutral, they maintain status quo.
Yeah, and I think you hit on one of the big things. I think Sasha was hitting on it earlier, talking about that protective part. Because we all see, the amazing, when you go for tourism, it attracts a lot of the pink economy. Thailand does, but it's what you said. But that's outside. But when you come inside the walls, where's the protective? And that's a whole nother stage. And it's the same. Tasha, for you, what about you and Adele and in India as well?
I think Jess said a lot, which is really, really impactful. And I think the employee resource groups, which she referred to as BRGs, really, really play a part in this. Representation, I can't tell you about how important it is to kind of, have people talking to it, having a voice and being visible about where their priorities lie and where their opinions lie. And very honestly, it is an opinion. Till you start digging into facts, and then you then it becomes a realization of of what it's based on. But I'll give you two examples, and it sounds really simplistic, but again, in India, when the 370 rule got changed, which made it it stopped being illegal for homosexual sex. It was something that's the first time we actually spoke about it in the country. It was a dinner table conversation. You were talking about it where there was, what are the right words to use? What are the right protocols to follow? And I think that's another big aspect of what we don't realize it's important from a pride perspective is language. Is how do we converse? How do we normalize conversations which are not offensive because we've been brought up a particular way? A particular word means something so different based on how you're using it and when you're using it and who you're using it against, right? So that's another aspect. But coming back to when this law came into place, and I think that's when we just started our employee resource group in India. And it was a coincidence, actually, because to Jez's point, we realized not having legal protection versus driving awareness about it as two different things, right? And coincidentally, when we were able to launch, the law had been kind of changed quite drastically. So it's important for us to understand what are we trying to change and where do you do the soft push? And that's very important. And Curtis, when you were talking about being the first, but it's a legal term, right? Precedence. Somebody unfortunately has to be first. And there's great empowerment that comes from being the first, but after that, everyone has to fall in line. And I think that's where we are seeing a challenge of, how are people falling in line with what are we trying to change? So one is the law that came and helped us launch our Pride ERG group. But again, it was a very small ERG group in sense because, 800 people, and everyone says only 800 people, but the other employee resource groups have more. So then it became that, you're not trying to change the number, you're trying to change people. So even if it's one person, it's really impactful. Then we started with gender neutral toilets. And I know everyone assumes it's the easiest thing to do, other than the legal rights, other than the HR policies, other than facility policies, all that, but it's also getting people to use it. It's no use having it as a door and as a tag on the thing saying gender neutral and no one goes and uses it. Where do you position it? How do you drive awareness that anybody can just walk into these gender neutral toilets because it's just so normal? And we actually started this conversation of how many of us use it. And we were very disappointed to realize none of us did because we are so conditioned, right? You just look at the toilet and you say, okay, ladies, men, and you walk in. So again, I think those are really important conversations to have to kind of talk about it. And the other one that we found through sheer, again, I wish it was deliberate, but I think it's sheer luck sometimes, is representation in our hiring protocols. So we were able to have somebody from the community who was part of the hiring team. And when they went to colleges, there was suddenly this different conversation happening because now people are saying, okay, now this is the company I want to work with. So I think that's important, Curtis. And I know you'll know it better than I do, right? That it's representation in a way that you see something and you realize, okay, this has other connotations also. And very honestly, also when you have representation, you also look at for me as a heterosexual woman, it's important for me that if this is accepted, then I know I'm going to get accepted. It's that conversation also. So I think it's very important for all of us to kind of be aware of what are each organization doing, what are the regions doing, and to also be very respectful of people living in their countries, in the region. Because while I have points of view, I know that there are certain protocols in Japan, for example. How do I respectfully navigate a conversation there? And that's very important for us in the region. So for, where we are very voracious in our views and our protocols, but we have to also be very respectful of who we're talking to. And I think that takes a lot of help. That's where organizations build in policies, build in, training sessions, roundtables, listening sessions to kind of have these conversations. But I think representation makes a lot of change, and we need to realize that a lot more. I know I went around about for that answer, but it's just not one path to it, unfortunately.
I love how you both compliment each other. You both dropped a lot of gems there. I think two things that you pulled out there quickly was when we do have those policies, because we do work hard behind the scenes, especially in our roles, we work with HR, to have those policies. But then if we don't promote them or use them, where are them? And then if you don't measure them, one of the policies, in Dow and Asia Pacific that we implemented in 2022, I believe, or 2021, was the introduction of domestic partner benefits. Now we had it in North America, but we didn't have it in Asia Pacific. And, it's using, having it. So we roll that out, but then are we measuring who's using that? And what I talked about earlier, we have these policies. What we have realized as of last year, I think we see in Asia, we're seeing, the aging population is growing, birth decline, the birth rate is declining, but we're also seeing fewer people get married for whatever their choices are, So we actually have found that domestic partner benefits, who was intended to be more equitable for our LGBT community, has actually benefited those who are deciding not to get married, but to still have partnerships and still be together, and so it's actually benefiting a broader community in that way. And so it was like, an unintended
That's a brilliant
impact,
point. Yes. Yes.
into that. So, and I love that. And I think, what both of you and Jason were both saying, that it's not only the culture inside, but it's also the culture outside. And so that's what I wanted to kind of talk into, and maybe just whoever wants to popcorn in this one on first, how do you assess the risk? So we think, we operate in many different countries within Asia Pacific, but the risk, at the end of the day, our business has to make money. Otherwise, we don't have jobs, or, our company can't continue to go on. And so we do have to maintain that license to operate. So in your roles and in your spheres of influence, how do you assess those potential risks and opportunities associated, like, say, with the legal challenges or regulatory challenges or policy developments as it relates to LGBTQI rights in workplaces? And then how do you prioritize maybe your advocacy? Oh, either one.
I can start, Curtis. I think to begin with, it comes with the acceptance that there are risks. And coming from, I would say, a privileged company, which is as big as IBM, where we can stand on our values for diversity and inclusion and know that the risks are there and that we accept that, is something that I know not all companies can do. But being in a company that is willing to take those risks, especially in difficult markets, is it's a good feeling to have. But it also comes with a lot of management, especially coming from the DNI team as well as the comms and branding team, etc. And I've seen this really work. So I think it begins with that, knowing the amount of risk that you can take as a company because it's the right thing to do. And then from there, managing it through the different stakeholders. So that's the backbone of what helps us. But of course, we build communities to be able to benefit us too. So for example, like communities like Out and Equal and other Asia Pacific wide communities of DNI advocates, just between the three of us, we already get to talk about certain things that are coming and the impact of that to our businesses, and having other DNI professionals in that discussion has been very helpful so far to me personally. Another aspect is, of course, to talking to our business resource groups, or knowing that we really don't know everything as either an HR or DNI organization, and people, and at least to me personally, because our business resource groups are hugely engaged, they don't only talk to us when we have an event that we have to do or if they have recommendations on policy. They also talk to us about recent trending news that affects the community. And so building that relationship is also crucial. So imagine if you have all these sources and resources, in addition to, of course, the news that you already read, you can really come well prepared in assessing and accepting the risks that come with it.
I love that. Your last
Yeah.
point there, you really elevated the R of ERGs or BRGs, the resource. That, like you said,
Yes.
our BRGs and ERGs are not just for events and policies, but also can really be that resource. Hey, what are we doing around this that's going on, that we just saw released? Or are we going to make a statement around this? Or, hey, this just happened in the community. Where are we going to come together and talk about this? And to be a resource to the business and not just the business as a resource to them. I love that you kind of, and you also talked about the values. And I think that's so important that when our companies put, ID or DEI as our values, like you said, that's something we can stand on. Some say, this is what we value as a business strategy as well, and so forth. So, Natasha, what about you?
I think two things that I'd re-stress to what Jess said. One is the unstructured community, which is all of us. I think the social media, which helps us. There's so much of information on social media, which sometimes makes you realize things are changing, but you're not seeing it because naturally you cannot be everywhere. So I think that's very important for us to use. And as again, Jess mentioned, all three of us have conversations. Our group of DNI leads have conversations, which are very important, right? But I think to your point, Curtis, the license to operate is very important. But remember, the license to operate was created in a time where there were very few variables. Now, for those variables to change, we have to keep on giving inputs. And I think what we have to understand is that giving of the input doesn't mean things are going to change right now. But giving an input or an insight or information means that rules will change over a period of time. Now, the more people that get involved in those conversations, the rules will change naturally because the environment is changing. If I look at simple things, for example, my 20, 30 years ago, there were no roles for me. I know it seems really a long time, but in hindsight, it's just 30 years. But that conversation for roles for me happened 70 years ago. So I think everyone has to really get involved in at least give your inputs, give your point of view. That is so important. Use whatever resources are available, let's not look at who's creating that resource and what's their gain. Because then it becomes a very different conversation. But if there is something out there, and there's information out there, which I could then use as inputs to somebody who's creating my process, and I keep on having people talk to it, it makes that change. And then you will see over a period of time that the change is there, but we've just not realized it and we've not been consistently at it. And it's not walking into a room and saying me, I, and myself, or me, I, and my process. It's getting everyone to have a point of view. I can't stress enough how important it is for everyone to have a conversation on this at every level, not just D&I leads, because for us it comes instinctively, but it's our BRG and ERG leads. It's our legal counsel. Do they come to us? Do they know? Are they reading? It's going to our HR compliance teams. What are they realizing? Our government affairs team. Because there is so much of information, and sometimes it's that right information in the right forum will have long-lasting effect. So it's important to have a conversation, Curtis. It's simple as that. And I know it sounds really cliched, but
no, because I think sometimes in our roles that I think sometimes in our organization.
Yeah. We lose Curtis.
Yeah. For all we know, he might still be talking.
I know technology at its best. I don't know if he'll watch his phone. Oh. Yeah, so I think, Jez, I'm sure what Curtis was saying, I'm sure you have a point of view on it and, where does it work? But I don't know how we're doing on time. Akriti, if you can just kind of give us a little shout out. Are we on time or do we have a little time?
We are. Thank you, Natasha. We still have like
Okay.
about 10 minutes, so we can start the
Perfect.
conversation. We don't
Perfect.
have any questions or like in the Q&A session right now. So, just sharing this with our participants. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. But I'll let both of you know. I see Curtis has
Okay.
joined as well, but Natasha, please continue your thought.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of pull a little bit on the unstructured protocols that we have in place, right? It's so important to have your WhatsApp groups. It's so important for us to kind of, get involved in conversations. And I can kind of just give a little context of where I struggle. Again, I struggle because my perspective is a very different one, but it's actually not. And sometimes I need you just to kind of bring me back into the conversation saying, listen, you're not different from me. You're having the same fight as I am having. But guess what? We don't talk to each other about it. I think that sense of vulnerability, and Curtis spoke about being the first to change laws. But how do you become the first to have that conversation that you're going to be having alone? And you don't know how it's going to be received by your audience. I've sometimes struggled with that, and sometimes people assume it's easy for me, but maybe Jez, you can give me your point of view, and while Curtis is back, how do you actually have those conversations?
I think from my point of view, I always start with the lived experience, how things affect my personal life. And because when we lead with that and not lead with some other people somewhere out there is affected by this in this way, it makes it a difficult conversation altogether.
I love it. I see. I meant to use lived experience, but then it's just so true. Thank you, Jez. I appreciate that. Curtis, good to have you back.
Sometimes we talk about those conversations, depends on what country you live, could be a little sensitive. So we always say,
true. Yes, that's so true.
Or we'll blame it on the network. But But Jess, I think what you said is the personal lived experience, and when it's my story, when it's our story, when it's that employee's story, it's not that we're highlighting them and putting them on a pedestal, but what it is saying that I'm an employee and this is my real experience and this is what I really had. We, I was in Japan, and we were talking to one of our manufacturing sites, and we realized there was kind of a disconnect with some of our technicians and operators, with some of our BRGs and just the wine, especially around Glad and such. And so I just scratched the whole, presentation that we're going to give as DEI professionals and said, how many of you know someone who's LGBTQIA in this office, in this site, or within your family sphere? And what if suddenly all of those people that were working in the site decided to leave the company? Now we have a talent gap. But what if that was your son who came out to you? What if that was your daughter that came out to you? Would you want them to work where you work? Would you want them to be able to walk into your office, to our manufacturing site, or log in virtually and to say that I want to work here because of the culture? And that's why the BRGs, that's why we do what we do, around LGBTQ or women for disabilities. Again, there's that intersection, but it's by telling a story, that, I left a company and I joined this company because of the inclusive hiring, because of the inclusive policies that give my partner and I equal benefits and equitable benefits. And it's building those, because I think when we tell our stories, as both of you do very well, we remove the label of LGBTQI and it becomes Jay's, it becomes Natasha's story, it becomes, Xiaowang's story. It becomes a real story of a real employee and of a real truth. And that is something that people can get behind, I think. So I know we have about 7 minutes left here. So please, if you do have questions, throw those in your our Q&A spot here. But I want to leave us or start to wrap us up with the future, starting from at 10 o'clock, or it depends on where you are in the region. Start in the next hour. What are you most excited? What gets you excited about the future around LGBTQI workplaces in your space and in your sphere of influence, both internally and in the community? What gets you most excited? Chase?
For me, because APAC is really where I'm in, and it's been an exciting couple of years just talking about decriminalization, marriage equality, anti-discrimination laws. So it just so happened that in the past couple of years, I think the countries are realizing how important this is. And it feels like they're in a race to actually do something and do something different. So that's exciting. However, that's gonna look like in the more difficult countries is another question. But to those countries that are neutral, I think there is a lot of progress. Also because of corporate advocacy and other the general community getting behind it because being more woke and stuff. However, again, as a double-edged sword, that also makes me nervous because it can bring about the potential complacency that comes with marriage equality. I know I've seen this in a lot of countries in other regions where there's marriage equality, but when you come to the workplace, it's a terrible culture. Just because companies don't think they need to do anything anymore because the law already provides what's needed. The law will never be enough. It's my perspective on this. So we have to always remain vigilant in terms of how do we react with these changes.
I love it. So the law is just the baseline, but what we can do internally is build upon for that belonging culture. Natasha, how about you?
For me, I think the genie's out of the box or the bottle or whatever you want to say, right? It's out. And I think that's exciting. It's exciting for me to see a younger generation so normalized about what I think are burning issues and what I think are these stark changes. And I think that's a great perspective to see around. I love governments. Surprising enough, as Jess said, some of the governments that you would not expect to have a point of view are actually getting involved in the conversation of, inclusion, and especially inclusion with LGBTQIA+. I think it's important from that point of view. I love how media is now representing, and I'm looking at the positives of it, right? Because there's a lot of positive recommendation, a lot of positive representation. I love that that's happening so openly and so, normally now in life. I love the fact that very honestly, we have conversations amongst groups of us where you are able to see individuals who have very stark views, but they have the opportunity to say it. And for me, as soon as they say it, then you've got an opportunity to jump in and, you know, have another point of view. And I think that's great. But I think to Jez's point, it's a double-edged sword, because while the genie gives me a wish, it gives somebody else also the same wish. And I think it's trying to realize those wishes shouldn't contradict with each other. And if somebody has the magic process of how to actually change people's minds, not just because it's my lived experience and Curtis, your lived experience and Jez's lived experience, it's so many people's lived experience. But the reality also of why are we coming to work? So I think the pragmatism of why we work versus the fantasy of how I want to change the world is a struggle that, again, we need to talk about and we need to kind of have conversations about. So I always go back to, is the more you can talk about it, it's amazing how people suddenly start realizing, okay, now this is the group that we need to talk to, and this is the group that we actually have already existing. And talent, I think talent is great, but I want my middle layer. I want my middle layer really saying, listen, I love the way this company operates, because if they're looking at this, then I know they're looking at me, even though I'm not part of the community, but I know it's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's never enough time. We could talk all day, but you know, I think
Absolutely.
some really great nuggets that we've dripped into here, you know, conversations. We've got to talk about it, you know, and it's not, and sometimes I think as DEI professionals, we're much more the bridgers or the connectors, we're the Legos in the middle, you know, connecting our ERGs to the legal team, to the government affairs team, to the country leadership, also, but to the, you know, to environmental health and safety folks as well. Bringing those bridges so that the conversations can happen, you know, and leaning into others. I think leaning into other companies, like, and leaning into organizations like Out and Equal, saying, hey, as a company or just as an employee, I'm looking, I'm struggling, I want to do. Can you help me connect me to folks who have already done that and learn from those processes and learn from those, like I said, who have done it before or who are having the same conversations in their companies. So I would definitely say I know both of you very well. I would say, you know, feel free to reach out to us we're on LinkedIn, you know, to reach out if you'd like to share. Definitely connect through Out and Equal as well. So thank you both for your insights. It's great to see both of you this morning. Great way to start my day.
Yes.
Akriti, Out and Equal, turn it back over to you.
Thank you all so much for your time this morning. I know it's very early morning for most of you there. So again, from the bottom of my heart, from Out and Equal, I really, really would like to thank you, Curtis, Natasha, Jez, for sharing your insight, for sharing your shared experience and best practices. Again, you know, we're learning from each other, and the webinar that, you know, we are creating is for that exact same purpose, is to share that the work that we're doing, you know, updating each other for, you know, on what we're doing, on the best practices of the industry. So, you know, thank you again so much for this. As I mentioned early in my welcome remark, we at Out and Equal are curating or will be, you know, curating 4 webinars this whole year, 1 every quarter. So please, those of you interested, keep an eye out for our next webinar that will be in our 2nd quarter. Stay tuned for more information regarding that. And like I said, this program today will be recorded, but it is not going to be shared, you know, publicly. We will be putting this conversation on Out and Equals Hub, so you all can have access to it. Again, thank you, my moderator and my panelists, for your time today. Very humbled to listen to all of you, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Be safe. Yes.
Bye.
Bye.